This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UN warns hunger is expected to increase in 23 global hotspots. South Africa makes over $2.5 billion in relief available to individuals and businesses. And Botswana sends nearly 300 troops to Mozambique's Cabo Delgado to help restore security there. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, South Africa's public sector workers agree on terms averting strike action. And in your sport, boxer Samuel Taki wins Ghana's first Olympic medal since 1992. We begin the hour on the issue of food insecurity. Hunger is expected to rise in 23 global hotspots in the next 3 months. That's according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, as well as the World Food Programme. The two UN agencies say the highest alerts for catastrophic situations are for Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region, where the number of people facing starvation and death is expected to rise to over 400,000. Meanwhile, the southern part of Madagascar, which has been hit by the worst drought in the past 40 years, is also at risk. Also on the list is South Sudan and the northern part of Nigeria. The new report on hunger hotspots by the UN agencies indicates that acute food insecurity is likely to worsen in many other countries, including Yemen, Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Kenya, the CAR, Haiti, and Syria. The report goes on to say that hunger is being driven mostly by conflict dynamics, as well as the impact of COVID-19, which includes food price hikes, rising inflation, a significant decrease in purchasing power, and various complications with harvesting seasons. Well, for more on this report, we're joined by CGTN's Giram Chala in Addis Ababa, Patrick Ayet, who's in Juba, Tesem Akende, who's in Jos, Nigeria, and Nick Madimbo is right here in Nairobi, Kenya. Let's start with you, Giram. Thank you, first of all. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Giram, let's start with you in Addis. The situation in Ethiopia has been called catastrophic by this UN report. Could you give us an indication or an update of what is happening, particularly in the Tigray region, and what some of the efforts that are being made there?
Well, it's been more than 9 months now since the conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia began. What the government started as a law enforcement mission turned out to be a war between the force in the Tigray region and the Ethiopian National Defense Force. After 9 months, the result is a lot of human casualties. Humanitarian situation in that regional state is now close to being catastrophic, according to the United Nations. At the moment, war, unfortunately, is continuing in different locations in the Tigray regional state, and understandably why sufferings of people are also continuing. Millions of people are now in need of food services, and many also have crossed borders to Sudan looking for shelter and security at the same time. The good news, perhaps, is now roundtable discussions in order to resolve the conflict peacefully are coming to the forefront. Different organizations, including the United Nations and governments, are also requesting for this peaceful negotiation to resolve the situation in the north. But however, the problem is humanitarian access is still a problem, and people's suffering is continuing. The hope is in the next few days things will change now that the UN is engaging the government and TPLF force in the north.
Thank you so much for that, Giram. Let's come to you, Patrick, in Juba. The report says that famine was most likely happening in parts of Pibor and was expected to continue. Patrick, what are the likely causes of such extreme hunger in some parts of South Sudan, and how is the government dealing with it?
Hannah, first of all, we were in Pibor about 2 weeks ago. We saw the situation is really alarming. Many women are really suffering. They have young children who are malnourished. These children do not have anything to feed on. You find the woman's breast milk is only coming water, is not nutritious. They're admitted in the hospital. Yes, coming to your question of what are the causes, the main cause here is violence, because in as much as the 2018 peace agreement ended 6 years of war, many of the residents returned to their own homes to try to begin farming, but the delay in formation of a new government designed by that peace agreement meant there was a power vacuum in the local government. Armed youth took advantage, raiding communities, so it displaced people. So the little food they had planted remained, and then it followed by relentless rain in 2019 and 2020, flooding in most parts of the country. The little crops that were grown were washed away, livestock washed away, people remain in internally displaced camps, no food, depending on humanitarian agencies for food. And of course, the government now is saying the only thing it's doing is to actually ensure that there is peace, to allow the humanitarian agencies to reach the people in need, because now the government itself does not have money. Even civil servant salaries are being paid in bits. There are still a lot of areas that they are supposed to cover. So to get money to provide any humanitarian services is really very difficult. And also, of course, the aid agencies are also complaining because even now rain has started again, and some parts of northern part of the country is flooding. So getting to those areas with food aid is extremely difficult. So the situation really is still continuing to deteriorate. The government has started providing some kind of farm inputs like hoes and ox plows, but this, of course, many say it will not help unless total peace returns to the country and the issue of flooding is addressed. Hannah.
Thank you so much for that, Patrick. Let's head over to Nigeria now, where Tesem Akinde is standing by for us. Tesem, what are some of the main causes of extreme hunger in some parts of Nigeria? And if you could please speak to us about how insurgency is contributing to food insecurity in northern Nigeria and how the authorities are responding.
Well, northern Nigeria is known for its arable nature. The land is good and it's good for agriculture. So the insurgency has taken a bad toll on the food situation generally. The United Nations in a report earlier this year brought about an estimated 350,000 people to have been killed as a result of this insurgency. Many of them were farmers. And about 2 million of those people are still in internally displaced camps at the moment. Now, this has far-reaching effect because many of these people have been farmers over time. They've been displaced from their ancestral lands where their mainstay had always been agriculture. So this has really affected their livelihoods and, by extension, the entire country and perhaps to say the entire African continent as well, because most of what they were doing was not just for local consumption here in Nigeria, most of their agricultural products. So there's some far-reaching effect to that. Many of them are still, internally displaced, about 2 million of them, according to the United Nations. About 300,000 children are malnourished at the moment as we speak. That's according to the United Nations as well. So it's a very sad situation, and over to what the government is doing. The government has launched several initiatives, one of which is to, give out improved seedlings to farmers who can at least farm at the moment. North central Nigeria is really affected by the farmer-herder clashes as well, which is also worsening the food situation at the moment. But with these improved seedlings, for at least those who can farm, this is to boost the agricultural produce. Talking about what the government is doing as well, we'd like to let you know that the military at the moment is launching several operations to ensure that these people, more territories are recovered from insurgents, so that those who are actually displaced at the moment and taking refuge in internally displaced camps return to their mainstay, which is agriculture, and by extension to have the situation improved. These are what is going on, but really the situation is pretty bad, but the government is also trying to have these people back to their sources of livelihoods and by extension their ancestral lands.
Thank you so much for that, Tesem. Let's head over now right here in Nairobi, Kenya. Nick, what is the state of food insecurity here in Kenya, and how is the government dealing with it?
Absolutely, Hannah. Thank you very much. And in Kenya, it's not different from other African countries. And it's a bit hectic for farmers. They're grappling with so much currently. And of course, the inconsistent, unpredictable rain patterns is really actually messing up their plans. I was in Eldoret, that's Kenya's Rift Valley, some 2 weeks ago. And we noticed that many farmers currently are actually shifting from even growing the maize crop to other crops. And of course, right now, they're focusing on what they'll actually put on the table to feed their families. And of course, you know that agriculture is actually the food basket of the country. It's been difficult for many farmers also with the fact that now the climatic changes is very unpredictable. For them, they just hope that indeed the rain patterns will be consistent for them to continue growing the crops they've been growing over time. But right now, they're grappling with a lot of issues. And the government is actually coming in swiftly in this case. They're actually giving the farmers subsidized fertilizers for them to now prepare for the new planting season. But at the moment, things are not really looking good for the farmers. Also, the government is now training farmers in terms of now climatic changes. They need to be aware of what is happening in the world, because not all the farmers are actually aware that indeed so many things are happening in terms of climatic changes that is affecting their returns. And they're spending so much in terms of production cost just to make sure that their harvest is consistent. But this time around in Kenya, things are very, very, very bad. And of course, in the northern part of Kenya, things are also looking bad. The drought situation is looming big time, and the government also is now trying to mobilize its resources to make sure they also come in and, of course, sort out the people suffering. Also, something else, Hannah, is that in Kenya, as much as they talk about highlands where many farmers actually grow crops, it's been very, very, very unfortunate because many farmers are actually abandoning agriculture and they're going to real estate. They're using the land actually to build houses for commercial purposes. So it's not very different from, of course, other African countries, but in Kenya, the situation is really, really bad. Now, catapulted also by the COVID-19 situation, many are not really comfortable just to go out there and, of course, do their daily chores. But it's very, very cumbersome right now. And as I've mentioned, COVID-19 has worsened things. Back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much for all that, Nick. Those were our correspondent, CGTN's Giram Chala, who was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for us. Patrick Uyet was speaking to us from Juba, South Sudan. Tessema Kende was in Jos, Nigeria. And Nick Mudimba right here in our newsroom at CGTN here in Nairobi, Kenya. Well, let's turn our attention to Somalia now, where herders are facing an uncertain future there, which some experts attribute to the effects of climate change as well as conflict, which has left communities struggling to survive. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
Herders in Somalia are facing multiple crises. Unpredictable weather patterns, droughts and floods have taken a toll on pastoralists, threatening their only livelihoods, their livestock. Conflict, the COVID-19 pandemic and recent locust invasions have compounded the effects of an already dire situation.
We lost 50 animals. There were 70. 50 died and we were left with 20 camels. Some no longer have livestock. They lost them all. That's how it is, and we are surviving.
Only God knows, but we wonder whether our way of life is in danger. If the droughts continue and the animals get fewer, then this way of life is in real danger. That is our fear.
Herds are dwindling as pasture for the animals become harder to find.
Somalia is located in East Africa, the Horn of Africa, that is known to be, in terms of global warming, 2.5 times faster than the rest of the world. This has brought extreme weather events. These extreme weather events, due to global warming, climate change, are droughts, floods, cyclones.
Recovery for the communities is becoming more difficult to envision.
The climate change combination has been worsened by an exceptional situation of coronavirus. When coronavirus came, the first consequence was the closure of the borders. And Somalia depends a lot in terms of import of goods, but also exporting livestock to the Arab.
According to the United Nations, climate-related hazards in Somalia have increased threefold in the past decades. Conflict has led to the internal displacement of some 2.9 million people. The lives of many Somalis depend on humanitarian efforts to support them while they try to rebuild what has been lost. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, let's head over to South Africa now, where thousands of businesses there are trying to rebuild following the recent wave of unrest. The government has made available over $2.5 billion in relief to enterprises and individuals who've lost everything. Acts of looting and arson engulfed the country following the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. CGTN's Jilu Shaya gives us the details.
Mohammed and Zoraida Sahib could do little to save their Durban-based textile factory when it was looted and burnt in the recent social unrest.
When I got into my premises, then it really hit me. God, this is gone. I thought maybe we would have something left over, like maybe the machinery, but there wasn't a single stitch that could be taken and, reused, because it's like they've taken away everything. From machinery to equipment to everything. So that was very, very hard so, because it was 27 years of hard work.
The couple started ZA Gear in 1994 with $1.50, some fabric and a sewing machine. It quickly grew into a thriving operation, employing 150 people and training dozens of others.
So they would come out with a diploma and a degree. We'd take them on as interns. And we used to train lots of sewing machine operators. So we had lots of young people that we needed quality controllers, we needed sewing machine operators. And then we had lots of young men that we used to teach them how to do cutting. So they used to do the cutting of the garments.
As the Saibs walk through the ruins, they realize it will take a lot more to build this time. They hope there will be considered in the state's $2.5 billion relief package.
What we need for this business to start up and running urgently is that we at least need all our machinery. We need a premises, we need the resources, we need a bit of working capital to give us a boost a bit from government, because we want to get this plant moving.
But they're eager to restart and have moved their operations home.
I have a huge plan in that I'm very positive in the sense that I know that there's a lot more to come. And I mean, people need food and people need clothes. All right, so we are lucky that we are in this industry. Our order books are now full. And we're ready for August, September, October, November.
It's going to be a tough task rebuilding this economy. Tens of thousands of businesses were obliterated in the unrest. The hard work starts now for many small enterprises who are hoping that they can survive this ordeal. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Uganda has received over 500,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines to help deal with the coronavirus. The doses are a donation from the Chinese and Norwegian governments. The East African countries only managed to vaccinate 5% of its targeted population. Leon Senyanga reports.
300,000 doses of the Sinovac vaccines are a donation from the Chinese government. The addition of the Sinovac vaccine is expected to help the country speed up its inoculation program.
The pandemic is a common enemy and a common challenge to the mankind and to each one of us. The virus really knows no border. To bring pandemic under control requires unity, solidarity, cooperation, and common actions.
Another 286,080 doses of AstraZeneca donated by the Norwegian government will supplement the country's campaign. The vaccines arrived hours after the lifting of a 42-day national lockdown. The opening up follows a remarkable reduction in COVID-19 cases from 1,735 cases at the peak in June to as low as 71 daily cases at the end of July.
Speed and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines in all countries is the key to combating the COVID-19 pandemic. The government of Uganda has handled the pandemic very well. But we recognize now the challenging situation Uganda is currently facing.
Uganda has so far administered over 1.1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccines. The ministry is also planning to include children aged between 12 and 18 years in its vaccination plan as it seeks to hit its target of inoculating 22 million Ugandans by next year.
The program will also begin quantifying that group, and soon the 22 million people will be expanded. The only way we can all return back to what seems to be normal life is after vaccination and observance of the standard operating procedures.
The government says some 2 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines it ordered will arrive in August. Uganda has so far registered more than 93,000 COVID-19 cases since March last year. Another 1.6 million doses of the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines are expected this September. Those officials say will cater for more than 800,000 people as Uganda moves to accelerate its vaccination program and contain the spread of the coronavirus. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, Kenya's efforts to ensure that at least 10 million people are vaccinated before December have received a major boost following the arrival of additional vaccines from the UK. The Kenyan government has welcomed the donation, saying it was timely as the country continues to battle the coronavirus. Here's CGTN's Nick Mudimba with more.
The 4,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines donated by the UK government arrived at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi on Saturday afternoon. Kenya's Ministry of Health halted the issuance of the first AstraZeneca dose towards the end of May after experiencing challenges in supply chain, restricting the available doses to giving the second dose to those who had already received the first.
This consignment could not have come at a better time, particularly when we're in a robust campaign to vaccinate our people against COVID-19, a disease that has caused untold suffering not only to Kenyans, but to the entire world.
To attain herd immunity, Kenya is supposed to vaccinate at least 60% of the population. The government of Kenya is currently prioritizing second doses of health workers, teachers, other essential workers, and people aged over 58. Kenya had vaccinated close to 1.7 million people by the end of July.
This is the first of 2 deliveries we'll be making. This is the bilateral donation, and we're also sending some through the COVAX system, of which we're great supporters. So we'll be sending 817,000 doses, hopefully in the next week or so. And we're looking forward to these vaccines, which are here behind me today, reaching the Kenyan population who need them during the course of next week.
Through bilateral donations, Kenya expects to receive 1.7 million doses of Pfizer vaccines from the US government, 235,000 doses of AstraZeneca jab from Greece, and another 55,000 doses of AstraZeneca from Latvia. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's take a look at what's happening over in the U.S., which registered over 100,000 daily coronavirus cases on a Friday, its highest since February. Health officials there say hospitalizations and deaths are increasing across the country. They say the Delta variant is largely to blame for the surge and are urging vaccinated people to wear masks in public indoor places. Meanwhile, millions of people who rent their homes are at risk of being forced from their homes as pandemic-related bans on residential evictions are set to expire. Toby Muse reports.
At midnight Saturday, federal protection preventing some evictions is set to come to an end, putting millions of Americans at risk of being evicted. To give an idea of the scale of the problem, according to the Census Bureau's most recent survey, 3.6 million Americans expressed some concern that they could be evicted in the next 2 months. The moratorium was first introduced last year as one of a number of measures to stabilize a hemorrhaging economy, including stimulus checks and enhanced unemployment benefits. Homeless shelters are now preparing for what could be a surge in new arrivals starting Monday. The idea of people cramped together in these homeless centres is particularly worrying given the recent growth in new cases of the coronavirus. Congress had made available $47 billion in rental assistance to help people behind with their rent, but local governments have only distributed around $3 billion of that. Critics say the red tape has made it difficult for people to get access to the funds. The eviction moratorium has been extended a few times in the past, but crucially rent payments have not been forgiven, but delayed, so some families who may have lost their jobs during the pandemic could be on the hook for thousands of dollars in back rent. Some states like California and New York have their own moratoriums on evictions that will continue. This issue has caused a rare note of discord between congressional Democrats and the White House, who up to this point have largely been on the same page during the presidency of Joe Biden. On Thursday, the White House said that because of an earlier Supreme Court ruling, it could not unilaterally extend the moratorium. It urged Congress to act, just as Congress was about to go on summer break. Democrats scrambled Friday to try to get a deal together, all to no avail. Some Democrats blamed the White House for springing it on them at the last moment. One Democrat of the progressive wing of the party spent the night sleeping on the steps of the Capitol Friday to protest the government's inaction. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington.
Let's not take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including Tunisian President Kais Saied rejects accusations of staging a coup. And Botswana sends nearly 300 troops to Cabo Delgado.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden Shirishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Botswana has sent nearly 300 troops to Mozambique. They join soldiers from the regional bloc Southern African Development Community. Troops from South Africa and Rwanda are already in Cabo Delgado. They are part of a mission to help Mozambique fight the growing Islamist insurgency. Well, we continue with that story. We're now joined by Chidi Nwano, Defense and Security Analyst at Pekavi Consulting, which is based in London. Thank you so much for joining us, Abide. Rwanda, a non-member of SADC, has sent troops to Mozambique. How is this being received?
Oh, good day, and thank you for having me. I think the reception depends on who you ask. So the Mozambican opposition parties have obviously been quite opposed to the deployment. Mozambique has quite a long history of foreign intervention, going back to the days of the Civil War, from the South Africans and the Russians, the Cubans, and all of the parties that more or less use Mozambique as a proxy battlefield. So there is a fairly negative history of foreign involvement, which kind of bites with all Mozambicans. So, but I think the population of Cabo Delgado will be just quite happy for any kind of assistance that's coming in. And the Rwandans are, quite well trained, quite experienced, and have, good experience of counterinsurgency. So I think from the perspective of the Mozambican population in Cabo Delgado, this is quite welcome. But if you look at, the political elite, this is seen as a fairly divisive move, not only because Parliament wasn't consulted, but because Rwanda is not even part of SADC. So this looks like a unilateral move by Frelimo and the president.
Well, just speak to us, other than Rwanda, the other nations that are going to be in Mozambique are considered, and they are foreign troops. How is that being received?
Well, it's a slightly different dynamic as this is a SADC deployment, and many of these countries already have some sort of a history with Mozambique. So Zimbabwe, who will be deploying troops, for many years during the 80s, deployed troops into Mozambique to defend, the railways. South Africa has a very mixed history, obviously, in Mozambique, but they're familiar. They're the regional superpower, the regional hegemon. So everyone expects South Africa to step up. Other powers such as Botswana and Namibia, they have less of a controversial history, but they also have fairly good, but small, competent militaries. So I think the mood is much more positive. I think the biggest issue there is more in the delay in the deployment and the questions about its sustainability. South Africa obviously has its own internal issues, and South Africa is the kind of linchpin around which all of this is built around. And if South Africa can't sustain this effort, then it's unlikely that the other countries can sustain a major effort by themselves.
Chidi, we've seen this happen in various parts of the continent when it comes to insurgencies, that sometimes what happens is that it spills over into across its borders into the rest of the region. So just speak to us about how this situation in Mozambique could impact stability within the SADC region.
Well, I think it's already having an impact. I mean, in Tanzania, in particular, there's a lot of cross-border issues, not just in terms of the violence or in terms of people from Tanzania, crossing in to join the rebels or fight with the rebels, but in terms of the disruption of the economy, the illegal mining and all the other kind of economic activities or illegal economic activities that surround insurgencies or ungoverned spaces. And at the same time, you've got the disruption that comes from the inability of Mozambique to exploit its gas fields from, the Total, declaring force majeure and all the other things associated with that. Now, that would have had a good impact on the regional economy. So all of these things put together, it's no longer a Mozambican problem. It's definitely a regional problem. And the contagion that would come if, this group is successful and can influence, other groups within the SADC region. South Africa has a significant Islamic population. It has a small but fairly vocal, Islamic extremist kind of sector as well that could be influenced by this. So it's in everyone's interest to kind of keep this under control, contain it to Mozambique, and hopefully wipe it out before it spreads.
Chidi, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Abide Chidi, an international defense and security expert, and he's based in London. And moving on to North Africa, Tunisia has undergone massive political transformations in the past week. President Kais Saied has sacked the country's prime minister, frozen parliament, and assumed executive powers. These are just among some of the sweeping measures he's put in place. Adnan Shiwashi tells us more.
This is the main street of Habib Bourguiba Avenue in downtown Tunis. This area was paralyzed last week due to the protests as well as tight security measures. Now people have resumed a normal life. The curfew has been shortened from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. starting this Sunday, following a presidential decree issued by the head of state. Meanwhile, the 4 governors of the Greater Tunis district, which is made up of 4 governors, namely Tunis, Ariana, Manouba and Benarus, decided to put an end to the measures regarding the ban on vehicle traffic during weekends and on the intercity travel ban. 2 members of parliament were arrested for incidents which took place before the July 25th presidential decisions. The Al-Nahda Islamic movement said it rejects any prosecution of MPs before military courts and their imprisonment. A group of the Al-Nahda youths have signed a petition calling for the resignation of Al-Nahda leader and Parliament Speaker Rashid Ghannouchi and his executive bureau. President Kais Saied declared that despite the current crisis, Tunisia remains concerned about guaranteeing and defending rights and freedoms and acting in strict compliance with the constitution. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, Tunisia's regional partners are closely following the unfolding political crisis. On Saturday, Egypt and Algeria's foreign ministers discussed the situation. Egypt's foreign minister expressed support for President Saied. Meanwhile, Tunisia's president's critics accuse him of attempting to establish a dictatorship. President Saied, however, denies the allegations, insisting that his actions are needed to fulfill demands made by the Tunisian people.
We are following with great interest what the Tunisian authority is doing in order to accomplish security, stability and the sovereignty of Tunisia, and we completely trust the wisdom and ability of the political leadership in Tunisia and its ability to manage the situation, to fulfill the demands and aspirations of the Tunisian people, and as the Algerian minister said, it is a Tunisian internal affair.
Let's head over to the Mediterranean, where western Greece has had huge wildfires which have forced evacuations and raids through forests to reach the shoreline. It broke out on Saturday in the hills east of Patras, the nation's third largest city. Helicopters, planes, and over 140 firefighters are battling the blaze. It's not the only wildfire currently in Greece. Authorities say that more than 50 have been reported across the country. Evangelos Sispas has more from Athens.
The Ministry of Citizen Protection has issued a warning to all Greek citizens and tourists to avoid any unnecessary work or travel, saying that there is a high risk of wildfires during the dangerous heat wave that is expected to peak early next week. The Hellenic National Meteorological Service has issued warnings for most of the country, with temperatures expected to rise above 40 degrees Celsius, climbing as high as 45 early next week. This is Greece's third bout of extreme heat this summer and could be the most severe. Many here in Athens have been seeking respite from the scorching weather, heading to air-conditioned centers or water fountains, while others went to nearby beaches hoping to cool down. But what worries authorities the most is the possibility of wildfires. That's why they order additional fire patrols and infrastructure maintenance inspections, while also urging people to show the highest degree of responsibility and cooperation.
We are all obligated to be extremely vigilant and avoid activity that could cause a wildfire, which will lead to catastrophic consequences. We kindly ask all citizens to avoid any activity in nature that could cause harm.
Earlier this week, people in the Stamata area, 30 kilometers north of Athens, were evacuated from the area after fires ripped through the pine forest, destroying their homes and cars before firefighters could bring the fire under control. Several parts of Greece are now on high alert. And although wildfires and heat waves are a common phenomenon here in Greece during the summer, authorities say that climate change is rising the risk of fires. Evangelos Sipsas for CGTN, Athens, Greece.
The business news after the break. Here's what you can expect. South Africa's public sector workers agree on terms averting strike action. And more people in rural areas in Nigeria tap into mobile money technology.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 48 hours of rain.
Time now for the business news. 60% of South Africa's public sector members, represented by 4 majority labor unions, signed a wage deal this week. This was after negotiations that had dragged on for over 3 months. The public sector workers finally agreed on a new wage deal averting strike action. Sumitra Naidu has the details.
4 labor unions representing nurses, teachers and government administrators were demanding in the region of 8%. But finally agreed to take a 1.5% increase.
We had to compromise quite a bit. If you look at our initial demands and where we ended up, I think there is a great difference. But looking at the current economic climate and what has happened over the last 2 weeks or so, that it would be in the interest of all public servants that we should sign the agreement.
The 1.5% is way below inflation, but it is more than what the government can afford. In the 2019-2020 financial year, $41 billion was spent on public worker salaries. South Africa has 1.2 million public service workers, and the Treasury is spending a third of the country's budget to pay them.
The agreement was anticipated, and I say this because the negotiations have been going for quite a while, and I do not think any party wanted it to a possible strike.
The PSA represents over 230,000 members. Agreeing to this deal is a major win for government, but the latest wage deal will only be in place for a year. South Africa's unions usually negotiate 3-year wage deals. Last year, government went against this policy due to COVID and the massive financial impact it had on the economy.
It's a shorter period. We are going to demand in future, taking lessons from what happened last year, that we will be negotiating annual salary agreement, unless we can get a multi-term that is satisfied to all our members.
It's understandable that unions in the space, in the public sector, are cautious and prefer now a 1-year agreement. It's going to be tricky. 3 years have always given a sense of security. If it's going to be happening yearly, that's going to change the dynamics of collective bargaining.
The unions are still fighting government on its failure to honor the last 3-year wage deal, but the courts ruled in favor of the finance ministry. However, the Constitutional Court is preparing to make its ruling. This may be a win for government, but this wage deal is important to all South Africans. Any strike action at this stage would have added to the trauma of recent events. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The adoption of mobile money in Nigeria has not seen the kind of rapid progress the country's central bank had predicted when it was launched 10 years ago. However, some progress has been made as more people in rural areas tap into the technology. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
Olamide Haruna is one of the more than 20 million mobile money customers in Nigeria. Thanks to the rollout of the mobile money initiative, she's able to send, receive and save money at this roadside mobile money shop in the Nigerian commercial capital of Lagos. Before she resorted to the use of mobile money, she would need to go to a bank to carry out the transactions.
Well, I think using mobile banking is easy, is fast, and it saves stress rather than going to the bank to queue and all that. So you rather just go there once and for all.
Mobile money shops like this are now becoming common sights in Lagos and across the country. The Central Bank of Nigeria is hoping to leverage the initiative to achieve financial inclusion for the country's 38 million unbanked adult population. There are more than 20 licensed mobile money operators in Nigeria, including banks, with hundreds of thousands of agents providing the service to clients across the country. This also includes clients who are already in the banking system.
You know, in the entire value chain, there are a lot of players. So, you know, the value in it beyond, you know, fostering transactional services between players. Also, you would see that, you know, there are people who are actively employed by the people that are in that value chain. So there is the employment angle, there is, you know, trade.
Nigeria still lags behind some of its African peers in the adoption of mobile money, but the numbers are growing rapidly. As of January last year, the volume of mobile payments in the country topped 7.4 million transactions, up from just over 700,000 in 2019. In the vast rural areas of Nigeria, mobile money services are quickly becoming the main means of sending, receiving, or even saving money.
One of the things that I foresee, or that, you know, would be a huge deal breaker, especially on the economic growth side of things, is, you know, a world where we can then start to push cross-border transactions through mobile money.
With internet penetration rapidly expanding in Nigeria, in addition to its huge unbanked population, the prospects for growth of mobile money in Africa's largest economy look bright, and experts say it's only a matter of time before it becomes the leading player on the continent.
If you look at the numbers, scratch the percentage. Now, if you look at the actual numbers in terms of, you know, how many of our banked people are actually having access to financial services, I would say that we're not too far off from some of our counterparts in other African countries.
The Central Bank of Nigeria recently issued additional comprehensive guidelines to further regulate mobile money services in the country. The Apex Bank says it is still confident that ultimately mobile money will help make the difference in its financial inclusion campaign. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, it's time for a short break. Here's what's still to come. We bring you a story of how Kenyan women in an informal settlement are making soap and masks to fight COVID-19.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
In Kenya, women living in an informal settlement in Nairobi are making masks and soap to help protect their communities from the fast-spreading COVID-19 Delta variant. And as CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports, the finished products are distributed to the less privileged at no cost.
This is Mathare, an informal slum settlement in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Close to 500,000 people live here. Majority of people in this slum live below the poverty line, earning less than $1 per day. Due to high demand, face masks here are in short supply. But residents like Billian Ojiwa have felt duty-bound to support their community.
At the beginning, the mask was almost $1 to the cost of buying a mask. So people would look at what is important to them. Is it food or mask? Is it food or soap? So that is what drove me to make sure that my community is covered.
Jennifer Akin is a tailor in Kenya's Mathare slum. Akin used to make clothes before the pandemic. With the support of other women, she's now creating face masks to help the vulnerable.
The problem I see out there is that many people do not wear masks because they cannot afford it. They say the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted their businesses. That's why we make these masks to help those who cannot afford to buy them.
Akin and our team make over 300 masks daily. In another section, the women are making liquid soap.
By giving to this soap, it helps them to wash their hands to prevent them this killing disease.
The finished products are distributed to those most in need. Volunteer youth from within the community assist in the distribution process. Monica Mugure, a street vendor in Mathare, is among the many beneficiaries.
I'm excited because I'm safe. There is coronavirus and I'm safe having a mask.
It's very hard to get a mask here because some of the vendors sell it at 10 shillings and getting that 10 shillings is very hard.
But Mathare's problems seem far from over due to overcrowding.
Many people here in Mathare live in overcrowded spaces where sanitation and social distancing are near impossible to maintain.
If you look at the population and the people living here, and even how their homes are, it is very, very, very hard to maintain social distancing because first, we are an intimate community. People work together, people live together, people living in small houses, many people. So maintaining social distancing is a problem, it's still a problem.
The Billion Foundation, in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation, are ensuring that the communities can reduce the chances of the pandemic spreading. Kenya has so far confirmed a total of 199,941 positive cases, with 187,824 recoveries and 3,895 deaths. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The latest in sport after the break, including boxer Samuel Taki wins Ghana's first Olympic medal since 1992.